Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Trump backs off from European tariffs threat in a bid to get Greenland. The US President is to participate in the Board of Peace Charter announcement in Davos. And Israel's attack on Gaza kills 11 Palestinians, including 3 journalists. US President Donald Trump has backed off from his tariff threats on European allies after exploring a potential deal on Greenland after talks with NATO. On social media, Trump offered little detail on what was discussed, but described it as very productive. Our correspondent has more on the story.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, with major twists and turns over Greenland. U.S. President Trump, after meeting with NATO Chief Mark Rutte, dropped his tariff threat against the EU and said he created the framework for a future deal that, quote, if consummated, will be great for the U.S. and all NATO nations. It will be handled by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. This development comes on the heels of the extraordinary summit in Brussels today, called by European Council President Antonio Costa after Trump's previous threats of tariffs. Costa decided to convene the meeting of the European Council after consultations with member states. According to Costa's statement, several topics were to be discussed: the importance of international law, unity in supporting Denmark and Greenland, and recognizing the shared transatlantic interest in peace and security. It will be interesting to find out how they position themselves now, given Trump's remarks last night. Earlier on Wednesday, in Trump's address at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he said he wanted to enter immediate negotiations to take control of the Arctic territory, calling it part of North America and vital to U.S. security. But he also said, quote, I don't want to use force. I won't use force. However, he asserted that no nation or group of nations is in any position to secure Greenland other than the U.S., and he challenged Denmark's claim to the autonomous territory. At stake in today's emergency summit is more than just a diplomatic response to Trump's dramatic Greenland gambit. It's a test of Europe's ability to defend its values, unity, and strategic autonomy. After Trump's claims of a framework deal with NATO and the suspension of planned tariffs on EU nations, Brussels must decide how far it's willing to push back against coercive pressure from a key ally without fracturing the transatlantic relationship. The outcome will shape not only EU-US ties and Arctic security policy, but also set a precedent for how Europe responds when its sovereignty and territorial integrity are challenged in an increasingly contested global order. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is due to meet US envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in Moscow later today, as efforts to end the war in Ukraine continue. The Kremlin said it appreciates Witkoff's diplomatic efforts, but declined to comment on his optimism that a deal is close, adding it would brief reporters after the talks. Witkoff said a lot of progress has been made, with negotiations narrowed down to one unresolved issue, though he didn't give details. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Switzerland, where he's expected to meet US President Donald Trump to discuss a proposed peace plan. Earlier, Trump said Zelensky and Putin were at a point where an agreement to end the war was possible.
There's tremendous hatred between President Zelensky and President.
Supporters of the YPG SDG staged a protest in Brussels on Wednesday, gathering near the European Parliament and waving group-linked flags while chanting slogans. Police intervened after unrest broke out, using tear gas and water cannons to break up the crowd. The demonstrators later moved to Schuman Square, near key EU buildings, where security was tightened with helicopters, riot control units and a heavy police presence. The protest took place amid renewed tensions in northeastern Syria. Clashes have erupted between the Syrian army and the SDF, which is led by the YPG, the Syrian branch of the PKK, designated as a terrorist organisation by the European Union. Spain's second fatal train crash in Ademuz has shaken the country after the accident killed 43 people. Its transport minister says preliminary investigations show the deadly train crash wasn't caused by human error, and added that the track had been inspected 4 times in the last 3 months. Authorities are also examining a key piece of machinery found near the site, which may explain how the collision occurred.
I do believe that it is clear that the human factor here, at least as far as the driving of the 2 trains is concerned, had no bearing. The Ireo train was travelling at a speed well below the maximum permitted on that section, which was 250 kilometres per hour, and the other one was travelling at around 200. According to the data we have at the moment, it may even have been slightly below the speed at the time of the accident.
Turning to the UK, a move that could see under 16-year-olds banned from using social media could be on its way to teens across the country, following in Australia's footsteps. The UK House of Lords has voted in favour to support a ban through an amendment to the government's school bill. Under the revisions, the government would get a year to decide what platforms should be banned. But the Labor government has indicated it will try to overturn the amendment and hold its own consultation. However, some Labor MPs are in favour of the ban. Several countries, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Egypt, have agreed to join US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace, which will be announced today in Davos. The move comes as United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warns against selectively applying international law. It comes in the middle of concerns from some US allies who have refused or not yet committed to the plan.
More than 30 countries have agreed to join US President Donald Trump's proposed Board of Peace, while several close American allies have declined or have yet to commit. The White House says around 35 leaders have accepted invitations. Those backing the initiative include Middle East allies such as Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt and Jordan. NATO members Turkey and Hungary have also signed up, alongside Pakistan, Indonesia, Vietnam, Morocco and several Central Asian states. Armenia and Azerbaijan have joined as well, months after a US brokered peace agreement between the two. Moscow has not formally accepted the invitation, but President Vladimir Putin said Russia could still contribute financially.
We could, I think, send $1 billion from Russian assets frozen under the previous US administration to Board of Peace. Incidentally, the remaining funds from our frozen assets in the US could be used to rebuild territories damaged by the fighting after a peace treaty is concluded between Russia and Ukraine.
Others have stayed away. Norway, Sweden and France have declined, and Germany, Britain and Japan have not stated a clear position. Ukraine says it is reviewing the proposal, but President Volodymyr Zelensky has questioned joining any body that could include Russia. The Board of Peace was first proposed by Trump last year as part of his plan to end the war in Gaza and is expected to expand to address conflicts worldwide. Trump would serve as its first chairman, supported by a US-led executive board. However, the United Nations has concerns that the board's charter goes beyond the framework of Gaza. Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warns against selectively applying international law, saying it risks undermining the global order and the UN Charter. The initiative's only formal mandate so far comes from the UN Security Council, which authorized it to operate in Gaza until 2027, overseeing reconstruction funding and a temporary international stabilization force.
And over to Gaza now, where 11 Palestinians have been killed, including 2 children and 3 journalists, according to local medics. Palestinian health officials said the reporters were killed while travelling in a car on an assignment sponsored by Egypt. The Israeli military said it had eliminated a Palestinian militant who posed a threat to soldiers. It's the latest violence disrupting a fragile 3-month ceasefire, with both sides blaming each other. Staying on Gaza, the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate. The The United Nations says damage to key infrastructure and access restrictions have disrupted around 70% of Gaza City's water supply. As winter conditions persist, thousands of displaced civilians are facing severe shortages of water and heating.
Our partners working on water, sanitation, and hygiene warn that approximately 70% of Gaza City's total water production is currently disrupted due to challenges related to repairing the Mekorot water supply line. The line comes from Israel into Gaza and is located east of the so-called Yellow Line, where Israeli forces remain deployed. An assessment of the pipeline identified the need for a section of steel pipe that is not available in Gaza and is restricted from entry into Gaza as a dual-use item. A request that one of our partners made to repair the Safa well, another important water source for Gaza City, was denied by the Israeli authorities on Sunday. As Gaza remains in the grip of winter, another hypothermia-related child death was reported by the Gaza Ministry of Health yesterday. This brings the total number of reported deaths linked to cold weather this season to 9. Once again, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs calls for urgent solutions, including allowing the entry of batteries, solar panels, and other energy sources that are needed to set up communal heating spaces.
So today, the United States President Donald Trump takes part in the announcement of the Board of Peace Charter at the Davos Congress Center in Switzerland on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum. The Board of Peace is designed to oversee reconstruction efforts, promote dialogue and support stabilization mechanisms in conflict zones. More than 30 countries have agreed to join a new Board of Peace proposed by US President Donald Trump, while several close American allies have declined or remain undecided. Supporters include key Middle Eastern states, NATO members such as Turkey and Hungary, several Central Asian countries, as well as Armenia and Azerbaijan, joining months after a US brokered peace agreement. Others, including France, Norway and Sweden, have opted out, while Germany, Britain and Japan have yet to take a clear position. Russia hasn't formally joined, though President Vladimir Putin has suggested financial contributions, and the initiative, initially focused on Gaza, is already raising wider questions, including the concerns from the United Nations about legitimacy, scope and the future of global diplomacy. So let's listen in now as Donald Trump is about to take the stage for the inauguration of the Gaza Peace Board.
Well, this is a very exciting day. Long in the making, and many countries have just received their notice, and everybody wants to be a part of it. And we'll work with many others, including the United Nations. But I want to thank you all for being here. Yesterday we had an incredibly successful visit with many of the world's top business leaders, the best, the biggest, most successful, and foreign heads of state. And now we have one of the most important meetings of all, the official formation of what is known as the Board of Peace. I want to thank the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and their extraordinary work. I mean, they've done an amazing job. We have peace in the Middle East. Nobody thought that was possible. We've settled 8 wars, and I believe another one's coming pretty soon. You know what that is? The one that I thought was going to be an easy one has turned out to be probably the most difficult. Last month, 29,000 people died, mostly soldiers, in Ukraine and Russia. Think of that, 29,000, 27,000 in the month before, 26,000 in the month before that. It's terrible. But we have meetings and we think we're making a lot of progress. Thanks as well to Secretary Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, and Chris Wright, U.S. Trade Representative, Jamieson Greer. They're all doing such an incredible job. Ambassador Callista Gingrich, who is here, doing a fantastic, really fantastic work. Thank you, Callista. And many other members of my administration who are so committed to peace, and they're also committed to great success. Very importantly, let me recognize the very first group of distinguished members of the Board of Peace. They will be introduced by name in just a moment. Caroline will be doing that introduction. And to each and every one of you, we are truly honored by your presence today. Leaders of countries, in most cases, very popular leaders. In some cases, not so popular, but that's the way it goes in life. Thanks as well to President Karol Nawrocki of Poland, who's a fantastic man. He just won a very big election. I'm very proud of him. Amazing. Along with former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair. Thank you, Tony, for being here. We appreciate it. And members of the Board of Peace Executive Board. Great group. This week marks the one-year anniversary of my second inauguration as president. No administration in history has achieved such a sweeping turnaround in 12 months' time at home and abroad. We have a tremendous mandate. We won the popular vote by millions. We won every swing state to 7. They were saying, can he win all 7? Is it possible? Because it's not done. And we won all 7. We have a great mandate back at home. As I said yesterday, the U.S. economy is booming with virtually no inflation. It was 1.2% for the last 3 months. And we inherited the worst inflation in the history of our country. And we have economic growth now of 5.4%, looks like. And I think that number can double and triple if we do the right things. And if we change thinking so that if you announce good numbers, the markets go up, instead of if you announce good numbers, the market goes down because everybody tries to kill it by lowering or raising interest rates depending on the situation. When America booms, the entire world booms. And we have secured commitments for over $18 trillion in new investment coming into our country, which is a record by many times over, not just by a little bit, by many times. There's no country ever in history that's gotten anywhere near that number. Slashed our trade deficit by 77%. This is in 1 year. Yesterday was 1 year. And signed historic trade deals with nations from all over the globe. Today, the world is richer, safer, and much more peaceful than it was just 1 year ago. We put out all those fires. A lot of people didn't know, including me, that some of those wars were going on. And some of them were going on for, in one case, 32 years, in another case, 35 years, and another one, 37 years. We were very happy to stop the war that had started with India and Pakistan, 2 nuclear nations. And I was very honored when the Prime Minister of Pakistan said President Trump saved 10 and maybe 20 million lives by getting that stopped just before bad things were going to happen. As president, I lived in Cambodia and Thailand. And by the way, many of the leaders are here. Kosovo and Serbia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, Pakistan and India, Israel and Iran, Egypt and Ethiopia. We're working on that right now. I met yesterday with a very good general and a very good leader of Egypt. We're working on a dam that was built which precludes the Nile River from getting water. It's a little tough situation, but we'll get that settled. I really had it just about settled in my first term, and then we had a rigged election. Took me out of commission for a little while, but here I am back. We'll get it settled. But it's a pretty tough situation. A dam was built and the water doesn't come down to the Nile. When I think of Egypt, I think of the Nile, but I think of the Nile with water in it. Armenia and Azerbaijan, a lot of these leaders have become my friends. They become my friends. They're here. And of course, the war in Gaza, which is really coming to an end. We have little fires that we'll put out, but they're little. They were giant, massive fires, and now they're down to little fires. We can put them out very easily. We have 59 countries that are involved in peace in the Middle East. Many of them not in the Middle East. They're near the Middle East, but they're not in the Middle East. And many have said that if Hamas doesn't do what they promised they would do, and I think they probably will, but they were born with rifles in their hands. They were literally born. The first day they had a rifle put into their hands, but they have to give up their weapons. And if they don't do that, it's going to be the end of them. But many countries have told me we want to go in and do it, and they really aren't countries that you traditionally think of as being involved in that. But that's the fire. Hezbollah in Lebanon, we have to do something about that. But these are, I call them remnants. They're small remnants compared to what it was before. It was massive, large, powerful countries fighting each other. In another great victory for the ultimate goal of peace in June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity with Operation, we call it Operation Midnight Hammer. It was midnight, it was dark, no moon, and every single one of those bombs from the B-2 bombers hit the air shafts and went deep into the earth and totally obliterated everything that they were doing. They were 2 months away from having a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen. And Iran does want to talk, and we'll talk. We've also hit ISIS in Syria, and very strongly, as you know. In my first administration, I took out al-Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS, and he was trying to start it up again because due to the tremendous talent of General Raisin Kane, as I call him, he wiped out ISIS in a period of 3 weeks in my first term. You know, we had a great first term, but the second term is, I think, blowing it away, actually. But we took out ISIS, and we hit, it was gone, but during the Biden administration, it formed again a little bit. We hit it very hard in Syria. And Syria, by the way, I spoke with the president, is making a lot of progress, tremendous progress, actually. We're very happy about that. We took off all sanctions, which gives them a chance to breathe. And he is working very, very hard, and I think he's going to put it all together. So many things are happening, many good things. Threats to Europe and America, the Middle East, and other places are really calming down. It's a lot different than it was just 1 year ago. Just 1 year ago, the world was actually on fire. A lot of people didn't know it. And in Nigeria, we're annihilating terrorists who are killing Christians. We've hit them very hard. They've killed thousands and thousands of Christians. What's that all about? Much of this unprecedented success is possible because I rebuilt our military in my first term, and now we're making it even stronger. We have a budget of over $1 trillion this year, and next year we're going to $1.5 trillion. Our country's never done better economically. We're taking in numbers that we've never taken in, not only the fact that the investment is at 18 trillion plus, but our jobs numbers, everything is, I think, maybe better than ever before. I think you're going to see and a lot of you are investing in our country. I think you're going to be extremely happy with your investments. I think you'll see numbers like you haven't seen before. I also secured commitments from virtually all NATO allies to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP. Everybody but Spain. I don't know what's happening with Spain. Why would they not do that? They want a free ride, I guess, huh? Every country but Spain increased to 5%. I don't know why. We're going to have to talk to Spain. With America's renewed attention to security of the Western Hemisphere, I've stopped the invasion on our southern border and designated the drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And you probably saw that we've virtually stopped almost 100% all drugs coming in by water. Now we're going to stop them on land. The land is easy. The water is tough. But that's down now. I heard it just last night. It was 97. Now it's 98.1%. And we're trying to figure out who are the 2% that are willing to get onto those boats. I don't think they watch television or the news. But we've taken out almost 100% of all of the drugs coming into the United States by water. And now we'll, I think, very easily stop them on land. That's the easy part. We wanted to wait till the other was taken care of. And earlier this month, thanks to the unrivaled skill, power, and might of the U.S. military, we have the most powerful military in the world by far. We captured the outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro and the people of Venezuela are very happy about it. And we're having great relationships with the new leaders of Venezuela. The relationships have been good. We're opening up the country to our giant oil companies, and it's going very well. We've already taken out, think of this, 50 million barrels of oil, and a lot of that's going to go back to Venezuela. They'll do more income with us in a short period of time than they did in years, because as much oil as they have, and they have a lot, just about the most. After us, there's a couple of countries that are in that category, but we have the most, actually, and they're second between Venezuela and us. We have 62% of the world's oil, but they have very little production, so they'll have a lot of production. All the oil companies, we had meetings, you probably saw, all the oil companies want to go in. They want to go in immediately. They're already touring the sites. But our military was amazing. That strike was amazing. We had a second wave coming. We didn't need it. They said, no second wave. We don't want a second wave. The first wave was enough. And of course, we're working to end the horrible killing in Ukraine, a war that should never have happened and would have never happened if I were president. That was not going to happen. I used to speak to Vladimir Putin about Ukraine, and it was the apple of his eye, but he would never have ever done it. Said, you can't do that, Vladimir. As part of this historic record of major peace initiatives, today we're announcing more details regarding the Board of Peace, so important. This board has the chance to be one of the most consequential bodies ever created, and it's my enormous honor to serve as its chairman. I was very honored when they asked me to do it. We had an idea to do it, and then they came, they said, you be the chairman. And but I take it very seriously. We have a great group of people and incredible young people that are leading it from within. It's running beautifully, started already. And every country, just about every country, wants to be a part of it. And we just sent out the letters a couple of days ago, and these are just the countries that are here. They happen to be in Davos. So we said, would be honored if you wanted to join us up on the stage. And it's really great. They're friends of mine. I think, let me see. Yeah, every one of them is a friend of mine. A couple, let's see, a couple I like, a couple I don't like. No, I like, actually, this group, I like every single one of them. Can you believe it? Usually I have about 2 or 3 that I can't stand. Usually I have 2 or 3 that I don't like. I don't find them up here. I like every one of these people. No, they're great people. They're great leaders. And the Board of Peace is composed of leaders, the top leaders in the world, actually. Last October, we released a plan for the permanent end to the conflict in Gaza, and I'm pleased to say that our vision was unanimously adopted by the United Nations Security Council late last year. Under phase 1 of this plan, we have painstakingly maintained that Gaza, and we're going to have it very strongly, and it's what we have, maintained the Gaza ceasefire, delivered record levels of humanitarian aid. We've given aid, you used to hear all the people were starving and it was terrible. Now we have, you don't hear that anymore. We've delivered record levels of humanitarian aid. I want to thank the United States, but I want to thank some of the countries that are sitting right up here, because they've sent great aid, aid also in the form of money, where we go out and purchase food, and you don't hear those stories anymore with people starving. And secured the release of all 20, we secured the release of all 20 living hostages. Now, I want to thank Steve Witkoff and Jared and everybody for working so hard. They worked so hard, but there were 20 remaining living hostages. Now, we got hundreds out, but the last 20, I said, boy, that's going to be a tough one. I said that a year before, and it was a tough one, but we got them. Got all 20, every one of them. And we had also about 28 that were dead, but the parents wanted them just as though they were living, just as much. Some cases, it almost seemed more. It was amazing, actually, the love. But their boy had been killed. In just about all cases, young men. Their boy had been killed, and they wanted the body of their boy. And It looked like it couldn't be done, and with the exception of one, and we're close on the track of that, we've got them all, every single one of them, which is amazing. It's a rough job. That was a rough job. And I've been very clear that Hamas must return that last remaining deceased hostage as well, and that will be the full commitment. And then we get on to other things, and we're committed to ensuring Gaza is demilitarized, properly governed, and beautifully rebuilt. It's going to be a great plan, and that's where the Board of Peace really started. And I think we can spread out to other things as we succeed with Gaza. We're going to be very successful in Gaza. It's going to be a great thing to watch, and we can do other things. We can do numerous other things. Once this board is completely formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do, and we'll do it in conjunction with the United Nations. You know, I've always said the United Nations has got tremendous potential, has not used it, but there's tremendous potential in the United Nations, and you have some great people at the United Nations, but so far it hasn't. You know, on the 8 wars that I ended, I never spoke to the United Nations about any of them. And you would think that I should have. You would think they could have done those 8 wars, but they couldn't have. And they tried, I guess, in some of them, but they didn't try hard enough. But there's tremendous potential with the United Nations. And I think the combination of the Board of Peace with the kind of people we have here, coupled with the United Nations, can be, you know, something very, very unique for the world. It's for the world. This isn't United States. This is for the world. As everyone can see today, the first steps toward a brighter day for the Middle East and a much safer future for the world are unfolding right before your very eyes. Together we are in a position to have an incredible chance. I don't even call it a chance. I think it's going to happen. To end decades of suffering, stop generations of hatred and bloodshed, and forge a beautiful, everlasting, and glorious peace for that region and for the whole region of the world, because I'm calling the world a region. The world is a region. We're going to have peace in the world. And boy, would that be a great legacy for all of us. Everybody in this room is a star, or you wouldn't be here. There's a reason that you're here, and you're all stars. You're the biggest people, the most important people in the world, most powerful people in the world. And when you use that genius that you have, that very unusual, very inspired genius, when you use that for peace, the opposite of peace has no chance. So I just want to say it's tremendous to be with you, and I think this is something that we're doing that's very important. This is the most important. I was so looking forward to being here, and yesterday was a tremendous success. A lot of good things happened, but this was something that I really wanted to be here and do, and I could think of no better place because so many people were together. And now to bring the Board of Peace into full force, I ask Sheikh Isa of Bahrain and Foreign Minister Bourita of Morocco to join me in signing and ratifying the Board of Peace Charter. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Congratulations, President Trump. The charter is now in full force, and the Board of Peace is now an official international organization. We will now continue the signing ceremonies, beginning with the President of Argentina and the Prime Minister of Armenia. Next up, the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of the Republic of Bulgaria. Thank you. Next, the Prime Minister of Hungary and the President of the Republic of Indonesia.
So welcome back to A News. Welcome back to the studio, rather. We just brought you live and rolling coverage from the Davos Economic Forum, and the signing ceremony of the Peace Board, the Gaza Peace Board, is still continuing. It's officially ratified now, and the signing ceremony is taking place. And just moments ago, we watched the President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, sign as well, together with the President of Bulgaria there. Now, for more on this, the significance of this announcement and what it could mean on the global stage, I'm joined now in the studio by my colleague Anastasia Levrina, presenter of Inside Politics and Frontline. Anastasia, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there we go, a very much anticipated event there, the announcement of the Gaza Peace Board, and the signing ceremony is taking place as we speak. So a few announcements there by the President alongside the official launch of the Gaza Peace Board. But let's focus on that. In simple terms, what is this board, Anastasia, and why is it being launched outside existing international frameworks? He did actually make reference to the United Nations and said they could have done so much in terms of bringing peace and ending wars. They didn't, but I did. And this last year was one of the best years on record. And it's a better place now. It's a wonderful world now. But anyway, let's talk about that. Why has it been launched outside of existing international frameworks?
Well, Delight, thank you so much for this excellent question. And I will start mentioning that it was very inspiring speech made by Donald Trump. As usual, he is speaking about the achievements within the first year of his second term, his presidency, and he spoke about the conflict which was he helped to resolve. And you're absolutely right mentioning that he again highlighted that unfortunately United Nations could not achieve the results dealing with the conflicts all around the globe. And I will add that it's not only Donald Trump who is mentioning it, but there are some other leaders and heads of the states who are blaming United Nations for their failed missions in resolving the conflicts. By the way, President of Azerbaijan just recently attending the panel discussion in Davos also referred to the situation in our region, in situation in between of Armenia and Azerbaijan, when there were 4 resolutions of the United Nations Security Councils adopted in 1993, which unfortunately remained only on the paper. So there are a lot of concern about the work of the United Nations, but what is also important to mention here is that this new organization is not going to replace the United Nations. There were some concern explained by some member states of the United Nations and also members of the European Union who are afraid about the future of the United Nations, whether this initiative of Donald Trump is going to replace the existing institutions. But we cannot ignore the fact that the United Nations is the only organization which is uniting all member states. It's a universal membership. Therefore, to replace this organization, as for now, it's almost impossible possible, then United Nations has a legal standing and also many agencies that can operate at scale. So this is the first moment which I wanted to highlight. And coming back to the initiative of Donald Trump, yes, indeed, it has a global concern, it has a global implications, mentioning all the conflicts in the world, but the main and primary role is to deal with the situation in Gaza. Within the last years, we could see the scale of destructions there, and now the countries are willing to unite the efforts to bring more peace and stability to the region. Israel itself already adopted the decision to join the Board of Peace. By the way, officially, the idea itself was announced by Donald Trump as a second phase of the United States brokered 20-point Gaza ceasefire plan in September, and now the main idea, I guess, the main mission of this organization is to show its efficiency in the situation in between of Gaza and Israel. If it works, then probably, of course, it will attract more participants. Now, if I'm not mistaken, it's more or less over 30 member states who agree to join the platform. But if it shows its efficiency in Gaza with Israel as well, then of course it will attract more global attention, and probably we should expect more member states to join and participate.
So, Anastasia, some countries have joined, others have refused. Does this already raise questions about the board's legitimacy?
There are some countries who express a concern, as I already mentioned, because they are not sure about the efficiency of this new platform, especially because of the United States has its veto right, meaning that the Board of Peace and the adopted decision for the future will have an improvement personally by the President of the United States. Now it's Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. So if he doesn't like any initiative, or he thinks that it will not have a right approach to the situation in any part of the world, then indeed he has a right, the veto right. So the countries like China and Russia, they decided not to join the platform at the moment. China is still thinking about this initiative, and Russia, as the statement was made by Vladimir Putin, is ready to invest, as you yourself now, in order to have to have a membership there, the permanent membership. You have to invest $1 billion, and it was mentioned by President of Russia that if United States United States can use this money from the frozen asset of Russian Federation, meaning that Russia is also willing somehow to invest to the future. Then we also can understand the concern of Ukraine, which is thinking about the being a member of within this organization together with Russia and Belarus and other countries. But before it was mentioned that Volodymyr Zelensky is coming to Davos and he's going to have a meeting with Donald Trump. So probably later on we will have more about the position of Ukraine. So, but I will say it's a good start. It's a good start to have over 30 countries who are joining the platform. And specifically, I want to highlight the position of Azerbaijan, who was invited as a founding member state, because President Donald Trump also reaffirmed the significant achievement Azerbaijan is done in the region of the South Caucasus, especially the situation in between of Armenia and Azerbaijan. It's a good sample how the countries are moving from the war phase to the peace phase, working on the peace agenda, the development of logistics, energy cooperation, and so on. It's a good continuation of all of those achievements highlighted and stated in Washington, D.C. in August 8th, when two countries agreed to proceed further working on the peace agenda and peace plan in the region for the South Caucasus. So I guess it's a good start for the platform now, but how it will be developed, I already said, much will depend on the outcomes and consequences for Gaza, its people, reconstruction. So now they need more countries with a good background as Azerbaijan, with a peace agenda and experience in logisticals and developments process.
So what Azerbaijan joined, but what does this signal about its broader diplomatic strategy and engagement with this US-led initiative, do you think?
Well, again, as Azerbaijan was joined as a founding member state, it's good that we have a chance to show more and to share our experience. Azerbaijan is a unique country. It has a good relations with the countries in the region, also in the Arab world. We have a great experience of leading the chairing non-aligned movement, and also we have a stable position in the Middle East, cooperation with the European Union from the energy and other perspectives. And two leaders, Donald Trump and President Ilham Aliyev, has an excellent friendly relations. Therefore, I guess it's a very good opportunity for Azerbaijan to use its regional and global position at the moment to make sure that all of those initiatives coming from the papers to the practical implementations. If Azerbaijan and Armenia already achieved it in our region, then we can somehow transform this from the papers to all of those global initiatives, which is going to be positioned by Donald Trump in the region of the Middle East. In this agenda, by the way, there are also such countries as the Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the Pakistan also joined, and Turkey. Turkey is also a NATO member state. So I guess here we have a unique place and unique number of participants with an excellent experience from different backgrounds, from the economic stance and also from the willingness and experience of resolving the conflicts, and willingness to participate from the financial side, because Gaza needs a lot of money for reconstruction and recovery. Participation of Israel and some Arab states make a platform for countries to negotiate and come up with a final solution. I would say that I spoke with some experts from Israel, and they expressed a concern about the future of Gaza with the presence of Hamas, because you yourself know what should come first, the reconstruction phase or the administration on how the Gaza will be ruled in the future, and what will be the stance of Hamas there, because Israel exclude any ways of cooperation with Hamas and with the administration there while Hamas is present. So now, yes, officially it's launched, and that's a good thing, but how it will come to the practical phase, how exactly the countries are going to negotiate and bring those, what should come first, administrative work, administration in Gaza, or the reconstruction phase. It's a very important moment, which I guess will be discussed later on in within this Board of Peace organization, and then already according to the structure, the founding executive board is going to implement the achieved results.
Okay. Anastasia, we've also got our colleague Orkan Amashov on the ground in Davos, and he's ready to connect with us as well. Orkan, you're there in Davos and you've been giving us updates consistently. So a very momentous occasion we just witnessed there. The Board of Peace is now launched and we watched the signing ceremony as well. What can you tell us about the situation on the ground there and the atmosphere?
Hello, Dilek, and greetings to Anastasia. Indeed, today is a day of immense consequentiality. Although many critics of President Donald Trump and this particular initiative, which has been formalized, and the charter of the Board of Peace being signed at this very moment, reality is also telling that international legal order, the way we understood it before, is actually crumbling. And this particular initiative seems to be an alternative to the UN-led process, but it is not as simple as they may appear. I mean, the idea first, of course, we remember, all of us remember, and Anastasia does as well, of course, that the first the idea was floated back in September by President Donald Trump. And then it was not so much about wider peace, not so much about the body dealing with wide range of international conflicts, but specifically designed to address the Gaza reconstruction. And that was the exact remit of the initial proposal. And when back in November 2025, UN Security Council adopted a resolution, I think, if memory serves me correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Dilek and Anastasia, I think it was 3.8 resolution, wherein it was said that UN supports this initiative and this body will be operating before Palestinian Authority assumes its responsibilities in Gaza. But what is presented today is not simply about Gaza. Gaza is only part of the wider scheme. What President Donald Trump is saying is going to be Board of Peace, chairmaned by President Trump himself. Naturally, permanent membership will require $1 billion tax. So all the founding members are to pay this amount of money. There's a very interesting moment here. I suppose we need to reflect on it. This is happening against the backdrop of the failure of UN as an institution and a wide range of criticism levied against it. And simultaneously, this particular initiative is made at a time when President Donald Trump is talking about ending 8 wars, and actually a new model of international conflict resolution being proposed, and in many ways accepted by many countries, definitely by founding member countries. So it's a very, very consequential moment indeed. Well, a number of European countries, including France and Germany, rejected this proposal because they believe it goes against the grain of UN system, but the UN system has been in tatters for some considerable time. So perhaps this will actually be able to induce, be source of injection of some sort of entrepreneurially driven peace resolution process. I think it is worth mentioning that President Donald Trump specifically mentioned President Aliyev of Azerbaijan and Prime Minister of Armenia as his friends. Naturally, he feels incredibly invested in the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process, which was and is a bilateral process, by the way, with the exception of course, connectivity-related matter. But that is, of course, a different matter. We can reflect upon it a bit later. But ultimately, Armenia, many other countries find themselves as part of this wide initiative. But I would like to refer our audience and you to one particular passage from the letter sent by President Trump to President Aliyev, which was later accepted by Azerbaijan. There was a specific reference to UN Security Council resolution, and Azerbaijan received this letter as UN mandated initiative and accepted it on that basis. So Azerbaijani position, as far as my reading of the situation is concerned, is perfectly consistent with acting in line with international law and also supporting what President Donald Trump is proposing as Board of Peace. But allow me to add one more point about it, Dilek, because, as I said, what was originally designed and proposed as a Gaza-related board is multidimensional now. We have proper board, where we have founding member, the heads of state and government of founding members, including Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. We got executive board, which will be dealing with a number of issues, including, and there on the board we have Tony Blair, we have US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and others. And there's a specific Gaza-related board, which will be governing and overseeing the process of Gaza reconstruction. This is something very big and absolutely consequential. And President Donald Trump is also calibrating. I think his mention of United Nations having tremendous potentiality is not particularly in line with what he's earlier said about this international organization. And I also would like specifically, Dilek, Anastasia, highlight the way Trump changes language about Greenland. If earlier he was talking about outright overtake of this island, Arctic island, now he's saying that he would not use force, he would not use excessive force, but ultimately he believes that the United States is poised to get what it wants to get. And my feeling is that, well, 1951 US-Denmark article and the treaty was literally giving the United States whatever they wanted, but probably they're going to have some sovereign military bases within the territory of this island without actually assuming full sovereignty over their Arctic island of Greenland. Something perhaps not so similar, but British overseas bases, military base in Cyprus, I think is a very good example of how you can actually maintain security and protect yourself without assuming full sovereignty. It's an evolving situation, Dilek and Anastasia. We will be reflecting upon it during the course of the day, but it is very clear there are those who are unhappy, in particular France and Germany, and President Donald Trump has been exercising what he likes to do, at what he has been absolutely excellent. It is self-aggrandizement, but also a degree of consequentiality and importance for the sake of greater good of human civilization. After all, he believes that the world was on fire a year ago, and the world, our globe, is much better place, primarily thanks to him.
Okay, as you said, Orkan, I just want to ask you, while I've got you there, just one other question. You said a lot of countries have been made unhappy, in fact, by this Board of Peace. And the initial idea was reconstruction and redevelopment in Gaza, but it is becoming more and more, as you said, multidimensional and multifaceted. Several countries have declined to participate. Is this about objections to the plan itself or concerns about how and by whom it's being led?
I think there are two reasons, Dilek. One is there has always been, from the very beginning, a degree of unease and degree of frustration with this initiative as being too unilateral and being not treaty-based, not treaty-bound, because we don't have internationally legally accepted treaty forming the basis of this particular organization. I don't know what will be the legal status of this piece of board charter. Will it qualify as an international treaty? We can look at it at a later stage. This is number one. And number two, there is a feeling amongst the international lawyers and UN analysts and some of the heads of state and government that what Trump initially pitched as a Gaza-related and Gaza-specific reconstruction project and initiative and board now being actually transformed and elevated into international body dealing with all sorts of problems. And I'm sure some of the people at the UN will have objections. They will say that we did support back in November the process related to Gaza, and that UN Security Council resolution, I think 8308 resolution, was about Gaza, not about the wider peace remit. And they could be feeling among many people that they were misled by the remit of this organization. But it's happening before us, and many European leaders are here. All the NATO allies are here, and their objections are not necessarily outright objections. I mean, UK Foreign Secretary said something very fascinating, I think, just a few hours ago. It said that, something along the lines, I can't remember exactly what was the quote, but, there are some concerns about any board which is dealing with peace and Vladimir Putin being part of it. Basically, there are objections related to Russia, related to the circumstances on the battlefield circumstances in Ukraine. This is a very interesting formulation. So UK is United States of America's key ally within the European geopolitical scope, and even UK did not object in an outright fashion. This means that whatever we may think about the discrepancy between the original formulation, which was Gaza-related, and the current formulation, which is wide-ranging, many European countries will eventually come to terms with this reality in one way or another. Critics of this plan, they are saying that it's a vanity project, it is a Mar-a-Lago extended court for President Donald Trump. But those criticisms may have their own merits, but I think ultimately it is all about efficiency. What Trump is saying, basically, in basic contours, United Nations Security Council failed miserably over the past few years. This institution is not helping peace. It has got immense potentiality. And perhaps Trump-led, entrepreneurially driven process could yield some sort of outcomes. But it does, of course, raise fundamental questions about the future of the UN itself, about international order, about rules-based order, which is naturally collapsing if it has not collapsed already. And there are criticisms. But bearing in mind, it's happening here in Davos, 56th Forum, the World Economic Annual Forum. The international credence, in a sense, is already given to this initiative, whether critics like it or not.
Orkan, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for updating us with the developments there in Davos today. Anastasia, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your contribution as well. That's all we have for now on the Board of Peace and the launch. We brought you that live from Davos. We'll continue to follow developments from the World Economic Forum there. Stay with us. We'll take a break now, and when we return, we'll look at major stories from the region.
It's too risky to stop and film outside, so we stay inside the vehicle.
We're dealing with an individual and with a regime that will not be satisfied with the mere reimposition of its authority.
Notre position est claire. Monsieur Kadhafi doit partir.
It is time for Gaddafi to go. اليوم ليس هذه الأماني والطموح اللي كنا نحلم بها في 2011.
دولة ملكنة في بعض المشاكل الميليشيات هذه صايرة في برنامج البلاد في ليبيا معناها.
الحصول على هذا المستوى ليس بالأمر السهل في دولة تشهد عدم استقرار سياسي من حوالي أكثر من 14 سنة.
لو ما تدخلش الجانب التركي وحاول انه هو يهدي الوضع، يوم احنا تحولت هذه الحرب لحرب أهلية.
We're having the infrastructure to produce 11 BCM cubic meter of gas per year.
هو إشارة قوية بأن ليبيا وصلت إلى مستوى من الاستقرار لا يمكن أن تعود به إلى الخلف.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Syria's government has accused Kurdish-led forces, SDF, of violating a newly agreed 4-day ceasefire by carrying out attacks that killed government soldiers in the northeast. The SDF denies responsibility, saying the deaths were caused by explosions during Syrian military operations.
A fragile 4-day ceasefire announced on Tuesday in the northeast of Syria is under threat after Damascus accused the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces of violating it. The Syrian government says SDF attacks killed 11 soldiers and wounded dozens more, including in what it described as a drone strike on troops securing a captured military base. The SDF denies any drone attack, blaming at least one deadly blast on explosives being moved by Syrian forces. The fighting comes as Damascus presses the SDF to agree to a plan for integration into the central state. Syrian troops have continued advancing in parts of Hasaka province, while the SDF retains control of Hasaka city and the Kurdish-majority city of Qamishli. Damascus says it will not enter those cities during the ceasefire. Security concerns have risen at detention sites linked to the Islamic State. Around 200 low-level IS fighters escaped from Shadadi prison earlier this week after SDF guards withdrew, though Syrian forces say many have since been recaptured. US officials add that hundreds of other foreign IS fighters were transferred before the escape and remain in custody. Government forces have also moved into the Al-Hol camp near the Iraqi border, which houses thousands of people linked to IS after the SDF withdrew from the area.
The United States has begun relocating 150 Islamic State detainees from Syria to Iraq in cooperation with Baghdad. Washington expressed gratitude for Iraq for facilitating the transfer, part of broader efforts to manage IS detainees amid shifting front lines. Up to 7,000 prisoners are expected to be moved after Syrian government troops advanced into northeastern regions over the weekend, reclaiming territory and forcing the SDF fighters to withdraw. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has urged the Kurdish-led SDF to disarm, warning that continued fighting in northern Syria would lead to further bloodshed. Adam Morrow has more from Istanbul.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called on the Kurdish-led SDF to lay down its arms to prevent further bloodshed in northern Syria, which in recent days has seen fierce fighting between SDF fighters and Syrian government forces. Erdogan's remarks follow a 4-day ultimatum issued by the Syrian government, giving the SDF a deadline to disarm, disband its structures, and integrate its fighters into Syria's state military apparatus. Speaking to members of his AK party in parliament, Erdogan said Turkey welcomed this week's ceasefire deal between the SDF and Damascus. He said he hoped the group's full integration into state institutions would usher in what he described as a new era in Syria. Erdogan said disarmament was the SDF's only way out, adding that further violent actions by the group would amount to a suicide attempt. He also called on Kurds in Turkey not to fall for what he described as provocations by the SDF, stressing that his government was continuing an ongoing peace process with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. Addressing lawmakers, Erdogan also described a Wednesday phone conversation with U.S. President Donald Trump as productive, saying the two leaders had discussed ways to ensure Syria's security and to step up joint efforts against the ISIS terrorist group. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Azerbaijan and the US have advanced talks on a strategic partnership charter, with the second working group meeting held online under high-level leadership. Discussions focused on energy, trade, security and digital cooperation. Meanwhile, a first-ever bilateral US business mission to Baku is scheduled for the 9th and 10th of February to strengthen economic ties.
Azerbaijan and the United States have been working to finalize the text for the Strategic Partnership Charter between both countries. This follows the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed at the Washington Peace Summit last August. They held their second meeting of the Strategic Working Group online. It was chaired by Azerbaijan's Deputy Foreign Minister Elnur Mammadov and the US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Sonata Kolta. Participants discussed cooperation in areas such as energy, trade, transit, as well as regional connectivity and investment. Also topics on defense and security, counter-terrorism, artificial intelligence, and digital infrastructure were talked about. Meanwhile, the US Chamber of Commerce, together with the US Department of State, is organizing the first bilateral business mission to Azerbaijan next month. During the two-day visit on the 9th and 10th of February in Baku, a high-level delegation will give US companies the opportunity to meet directly with Azerbaijani government bodies, state-owned companies, and leading private sector firms. They'll be focusing on energy, digital transformation, defense, transport, as well as agriculture, healthcare, finance, and investment. The program includes meetings with the presidential administration, the Cabinet of Ministers, relevant ministries, as well as with SOCAR, the State Oil Fund of Azerbaijan, Azepromo, Pasha Holding, and the Azerbaijan-US Chamber of Commerce.
Azerbaijan SOCAR is acquiring a 10% stake in the Baleine oil and gas project off the coast of Côte d'Ivoire. The deal with Italy's Eni was signed in Davos during the World Economic Forum by SOCAR President Rovshan Najaf and Eni CEO Claudio Descalzi. Baleine, one of West Africa's largest offshore discoveries, began production in 2023 and is set to expand significantly in its next development phase. On the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, the State Oil Fund of Azerbaijan has taken a new step with one of the world's largest real asset managers. The partnership has large implications for investment in the region.
The State Oil Fund of Azerbaijan, SOFAZ, has signed a Memorandum of Understanding with Brookfield Asset Management to establish a long-term strategic partnership. The agreement was signed on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum and formalizes existing relations into a structured and expanded cooperation framework. Under the memorandum, the parties will explore up to $1.4 billion in investment and co-investment opportunities over the next 3 to 4 years, including potential direct investments in Azerbaijan. Priority sectors include financial and digital infrastructure, data centers, transport and logistics assets, energy transition and renewables, and real estate. The cooperation also provides for the creation of sector-specific working groups, joint site visits, and technical sessions to identify commercially viable projects. The partnership gives SOFAZ access to Brookfield's global real asset management expertise, supporting more advanced and long-term investment strategies. For Azerbaijan, the cooperation is expected to support capital diversification and the development of sustainable infrastructure projects beyond the traditional energy sector. Brookfield Asset Management manages over $1 trillion in assets worldwide and operates across infrastructure, logistics, energy, and digital networks.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said that the energy systems of Armenia and Azerbaijan will be integrated. He added that both countries will be able to use export and import opportunities on equal terms. Pashinyan also described the trip route as primarily an investment project, noting that political issues are gradually taking a back seat, and said the initiative is increasingly becoming an economic project. The European Union has formally launched a process to suspend visa-free travel for Georgian diplomats and officials. EU leaders warn that if Georgia fails to align with core democratic, the visa-free regime enjoyed by all Georgian citizens could also be at risk. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has more from Tbilisi.
At a briefing on January 21st, European Commission spokesperson Markus Lammert confirmed that the EU has activated a revised visa suspension mechanism targeting holders of Georgian diplomatic, service and official passports. The European Commission has already sent its assessment to the European Parliament and the Council, starting a process that, once approved, will make the suspension mandatory and uniform across all EU member states. EU officials say the decision follows years of growing concern, which intensified after disputed parliamentary elections in 2024, continued mass protests, pressure on journalists, and what Brussels describes as democratic backsliding in Georgia. Although the EU partially suspended visa facilitation for Georgian diplomats last January, not all member states implemented the decision. As a result, the EU updated its legal framework at the end of 2025, making the mechanism faster, clearer, and easier to enforce. The new system focuses on passport categories rather than individual officials. Brussels stresses that this is only the first step. European officials openly warn that if the current course continues, visa-free travel could be restricted for all ordinary Georgian citizens as well. A December European Commission report stated that Georgia could ultimately lose visa-free travel entirely and be moved to the EU's visa-required country list. The response from the ruling Georgian Dream has been openly confrontational. Parliamentary Speaker Shalwa Papuashvili dismissed the move as bureaucratic blackmail, saying that officials are not afraid of visas and will not trade what he called patriotism for pressure from Brussels, signaling a firm refusal to change the course. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
The Iranian people are still without access to global internet on Wednesday, although most of the domestic connections are available. It's after weeks of protests have subsided that saw thousands being killed.
Iran remains largely cut off from the global internet. Around 90 million people in the country remain without communication to the outside world, according to data from NetBlocks. While most domestic internet services are now working, access to the global web is still restricted for ordinary Iranians. The government says it started restoring internet connections for some offices and companies involved in international business. However, personal mobile phones, home networks, and foreign media offices remain offline. Internet restriction was the government's decision during the recent unrest. Nationwide protests broke out in late December after the national currency, the rial, lost value and prices rose sharply. The unrest has now subsided. Currently, and the country's military and intelligence agencies say they're working to arrest terrorist groups. Iranian state television has released the first official death toll from the recent anti-government demonstrations, reporting that more than 3,117 people were killed during the crackdown. Meanwhile, Iranian media warn that the prolonged internet blackout could seriously damage the country's digital economy. One online retail company reports sales have fallen by as much as 80 to 90%, raising concerns that continued disruptions could trigger a broader economic downturn in the coming months.
Oil production at one of the world's largest oil fields in Kazakhstan remains disrupted following a major infrastructure incident. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina has the details from Almaty.
oil production at one of Kazakhstan's largest oil fields, Tengiz, is set to remain suspended for another 7 to 10 days. This is according to Reuters, citing sources familiar with the situation. The shutdown follows a major fire at a gas-fired power plant supplying the Tengiz oil field on January 18th. The blaze damaged key electricity systems, halting production at Tengiz and the neighboring Karlov oil field. Sources cited by Reuters say the halt could last at least until the end of the week and potentially into February. The agency also reports that 5 export shipments of CPC blend crude totaling between 600 and 700,000 tons have been cancelled for January and February loadings. Meanwhile, industry sources say the drop in output at Tengiz has not yet affected Kazakhstan's overall oil production. Crude output fell by 35% in the first 12 days of January compared to December levels, largely due to export constraints on the CPC pipeline. However, production has since rebounded at major Caspian fields, including Kashagan and Karachaganak. A-News requested comment from Tengizchevroil, the project operator. The company declined to confirm or deny the information and said it would provide updates as the situation develops. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A-News.
Afghanistan is seeking to deepen international cooperation on disaster response and humanitarian assistance as officials in Kabul met with a senior diplomat from Azerbaijan. The talks focused on mine clearance, emergency response and expanding bilateral support for disaster-affected communities. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
The General Director of Afghanistan's National Disaster Management Authority has met with the Ambassador of Azerbaijan to discuss a closer cooperation in disaster management and humanitarian assistance. During the meeting in Kabul, Nuruddin Turabi welcomed Azerbaijan Ambassador Ilham Mammadov, describing Azerbaijan as a country that has maintained positive relations with the Afghan people over the years. Turabi said Afghanistan is seeking cordial relations with the international community, particularly with neighboring and Muslim countries, stressing that the country's humanitarian diplomacy remains non-political. The disaster management chief also highlighted mine clearance as one of the authority's core responsibilities, calling on Azerbaijan to use its ties with international donors to help support Afghanistan's mine action programs. For his part, Ambassador Mammadov said the two countries share cultural and religious commonalities that could help strengthen bilateral relations. He emphasized that Azerbaijan's policy is based on non-interference in Afghanistan's internal affairs, while continuing to support the Afghan people through humanitarian and development cooperation. Mammadov also noted that Afghanistan's representatives have been included in international conferences hosted by Azerbaijan, adding that Kabul would be invited to another major conference scheduled to take place there next year. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A-News.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A-News.